It's really my name is Manar. I'm the Palestine Education Manager at PAC. And we already discussed that this will be in English, but if you need translation into Arabic, we are going to have a translator also join us. Um, and so I want this is the closing to our Palestine week. And so our Palestine week commemorates the Nakba, but also we have a lot of community events like flag raising ceremonies in Patterson and Clifton. And we have children activities to make sure that our local community learns as much about Palestine as possible. Thank you today to our moderator who will be taking over soon, Mr. Abid Awed. And we are honored today to have our guest, Mr. Mohammed Dahleh from Jerusalem. Today is an important discussion examining land settlement and policies in Jerusalem and the West Bank, the recent amendments to the Israeli land related legislation in those areas, and the legal and national risks and implications facing Palestinians. Mr. Muhammad was born in Nazareth in 1968. He's a lawyer and a human rights advocate that has spent over 3 decades at the intersection of Israeli and Palestinian legal systems. And so we are very honored to have him here today to learn from. Uh, Thank you. If you have any questions, please since this is a shorter session today, make sure you put them in the chat so that we save them and try to answer them by the end. And Mr. Awad will make sure to prioritize answering some questions if possible. Um, and please also make sure to stay connected with us at PAC for more events. If you want to recommend any events or have requests, please let us know. And I will leave our contact in the chat. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Manad, for that kind introduction. We're very fortunate today to have Brother Mohammed Dahleh. He's a distinguished Palestinian Israeli attorney that has been acting and practicing law before Israeli courts for the past 3 decades plus. And throughout his career, and why he's here today with us, is he has a unique expertise that he's represented clients over the past almost 4 decades in complex property ownership disputes, land registration and planning and zoning cases, and litigation involving most of the Israeli government agencies, including the illegal settlement organizations that are affecting Palestinian communities in Jerusalem and in the West Bank. And he's a member of the Israeli bar, but on top of it, he's also a seasoned American trained lawyer, as he's also a member of the New York bar. And he's a sought out, frequent legal commentator and legal analyst in the media, regarding and treated as a leading authority on the Israeli absentee laws that have been used and abused to undermine Palestinian property rights pre-48 and post-67. And he's also an academic. He's taught for over a decade at Hebrew University and other law schools in Israel. And one of the things that matters very much dear to me is that he's one of the founders of Adalah. And Adalah is basically the Palestinian ACLU. I was inspired by the lawyer Adalah back in 2001 when I visited them when I was a young lawyer. So he's one of those founders, and he's a board member of many, many human rights organizations. So we really want to thank you, Muhammad, for taking the time and joining with us today. We're really excited to learn and better understand what's going on. I'm thinking the best way that we can conduct this conversation is let's start with the historical context, because very important. Most Palestinians, we know about absentee laws. We keep hearing absentee laws, absentee laws. Can you give us a little historical context on how the absentee law took effect, how it's been used and abused historically, before we move into its modern manifestations now in 2026?
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, Abid, for this generous introduction. And thank you for having me. It's really a pleasure to be with you all. I hope very soon I can attend one of your events not virtually, but actually personally in New Jersey, as I come often to the East Coast, and that will be a pleasure to meet you all in person. As for your question, Abid, yeah, it's actually a very relevant question to the title of this meeting that we are having, because the absentees property law is related to the Palestinian existence from day one. This law was enacted, first of all, inside Israel. And according to this law, basically, any Palestinian who left Palestine after the date of the partition plan, which was the 29th of November, 1947. If that Palestinian left to any of the neighboring Arab countries that were from an Israeli point of view, enemy countries, meaning Lebanon, Jordan, Syria, and Egypt, or left actually to the West Bank and Gaza, because lots of Palestinians, as you know, left the 1948 areas to the West Bank and Gaza. If he or she left to those areas, plus to Saudi Arabia and Yemen and Iraq, because those were the states that declared war in 1948. If any Palestinian left to those areas, he or she were considered to be absentees, and their property, whether it's land, whether it's movable or immovable, but we are concerned now with land and housing, his property would be deemed immediately as what they call absentees property. And Israel has established what it called the custodian for absentees property. The custodian, I mean, it hints, it gives you the implication that it's an agency that will keep custody for the absentees until they come back. But the truth of the matter, that inside the green line, meaning within the Israeli borders of 1948, between 1948 and 1967, anybody who was considered to be an absentee basically lost the title over his property, and the title was transferred immediately without even a need for any action, legal or administrative. It was transferred to the custodian of absentees property, and from that custodian, usually it is transferred to what they call the development authority, meaning it's an authority that develops lands and housing projects for Israelis. So basically, that's a way to confiscate the lands of all the Palestinian refugees. We are talking about around 700,000 Palestinian refugees who had to leave or were expelled from Palestine in 1948. So their property in around 500 towns and villages that were destroyed, and in the cities like Jaffa, Haifa, Akka, it's Ramle, Lod, in all these cities, all their property were considered as absentees property and were taken by the custodian, therefore by the Israeli government, and then they were used for the general Israeli public purposes, meaning not for the Palestinians. So this law was passed immediately after the creation of Israel, one of the first laws, and then it was applied to East Jerusalem in 1967. As you know, I don't know if we have here Palestinians from East Jerusalem on this call, but after they occupied the West Bank, they basically separated a certain portion of the West Bank and they called it East Jerusalem, and they applied the Israeli laws there. And now we have like this, we have basically two categories. We have what we know today as East Jerusalem, where the Israeli law applies, and we have the rest of the West Bank, where military laws applies. It's actually military orders that the military commander issues, and it has the validity of any law that is enacted in any country in the world. It's like the laws of the Knesset or the laws of any parliament in the world. So in East Jerusalem, the same old absentees property law was applied, and therefore the same fate Palestinians in East Jerusalem faced, meaning all Palestinians who were not during the Naksa now, who were not during the war, June the 5th, 1967, who were not present in Palestine, and they did not get what they call Israeli blue IDs. Here they call them Jerusalemite IDs. They were also considered to be absentees. Actually, some of them were living in the West Bank, not outside of Palestine. They were living in the West Bank, their property in East Jerusalem, and based on that law, they were considered as absentees, and their property was taken from them. Now, the third category is what maybe most of the participants here are concerned about, which is the West Bank itself without East Jerusalem. In the West Bank itself, they did not apply the same law. They, as I said, issued what they call a military order that has the same normative value, the same validity as a law. But in those areas, they didn't even use exactly the term absentees property, but they used what they call amwal matruki, neglected or neglected property. And the definition was similar to the absentees property, but not quite the same. In the West Bank, they said any land or property that the owner of it or the one who had position over that land was outside of what they call the territory, meaning the West Bank, okay? His land would be transferred to the administration of a governmental body established by the military commander. But the difference between this mechanism and the absentees property law inside Israel, that they said for the West Bank, if the owner returns, that's the term that they use, if the owner of the property or the one who had position over the property, meaning was cultivating, using, whatever the property, if he comes back, I'm sorry say using he all the time, but for the purposes of being quicker, and maybe because يعني احنا الفلسطيني شوي بيجي chauvinist, I don't know, but it's he or she, okay? Anybody who comes back to the homeland, to the West Bank, would be actually entitled to go through a process of getting the property back, okay? You would file basically a motion to that same governmental body called the مسؤول الأموال الحكومية, the governmental property custodian or agency. And if you prove that the owner, although he wasn't here, even if he wasn't here during the war, but for some reason he came back, let's say one of the reasons, family reunification.
Sure.
Another reason, West Bank, is a lot of Palestinians came back during the Oslo agreements. They were able to come back to the West Bank and to get their either new IDs or to get back their old IDs. So those persons, even if their property was considered as neglected property or left, okay, they are able to get that property back. And I have been through this process for many Palestinians, and we were able to get that property back. Again, this is related, Abed, to what the first speaker, Ms. Hussein, I think, started by saying about the settlement, that now they are, that's the trigger actually for our conversation. And I think, Abed, it's important here to differentiate, because we hear settlement all the time. But this time, what they mean, it's not the settlements that we know. When they say we are going to do the settlement of land, people confuse it with the settlements that we hear all the time. So I want to make that clear so that everybody understands. Now they are talking about a process. The legal term is the land settlement, okay? بالعربي اللي بيعرف بسموها التسوية. It's a taswiyah. They settle different disputes over the land, and that's why they call it the settlement of land. But for our purposes, so that we differentiate it from all the settlements, the illegal settlements that the Israelis are building in the occupied territories, let's call it land registration. Basically, the Israelis now have decided, after 59 years of occupation, they've decided to start this process of land registration in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. In East Jerusalem, they have decided to start in 2018, and that wasn't it was the date is important because it happened immediately after President Trump declared Jerusalem as the capital, or recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, and moved the American embassy to Jerusalem. Up until that time, the Israelis were afraid of going through this process of land registration because of different reasons, but mainly because of criticism from the international community, and because land registration usually is being done by the sovereign power, by the state, the legitimate government of the people, not by a temporary military occupation. Military occupation under international law is supposed to be temporary. It's a temporary situation. It's not an eternal situation. While land registration is something that is for eternity. When you finish that process, all the lands are registered in the names of the owners, and therefore this is something that occupier doesn't do. So Israel was afraid of, at the time, they were afraid of the criticism of the international community and so on, and because of international relations, and they refrained from starting that process until 2018, as I said. And at that time, the Israeli Minister of Justice, Yair Shaked, a very right-wing from a right-wing party, decided to start that process in East Jerusalem only. Now, this process of land registration, it's what it means, okay? I don't know if you are all aware, Palestine, you are aware, Palestine has gone through different rulers over history until during the Ottoman period, okay, the registration of land was not modernized, meaning the lands were not registered based on agreed upon borders, okay? So they would define the parcels or the lands that people own by describing the neighbors from each direction. So they would say from the north, Abed Awad, and from the south, Diab Mustafa, and from the east, Bassem Hishmi, and from the whatever, west, Samah Bahur. That's the way they used to do it. But then this, of course, this is not a modern way to do it, because people buy and sell lands, and then you get confused where exactly the border, and the one in the south sells and the one in the north buys, and so on. So they needed to modernize that process. So they started during the mandate over Palestine. The British started modernizing the registration of land, and they passed this law called the registration of land process, or settlement of land, as we said. And basically what they would do, they would come to a certain area, certain village, let's say, and they would declare that we have started now the process of land registration in this area. They would describe the area, okay, and then they would invite everybody from that village, or for anybody for that matter. They would say, okay, if anybody has a claim over any part of this area, of this land, please file your claim, okay? Once the claims are filed, they compile all these claims, and they see if the claims are contradicting. And if there is a contradiction, usually the claims go to some kind of judicial body that would adjudicate and decide who owns what. And eventually, after all this process is finished, you have a detailed map, okay, with coordinations, where everybody knows where his land is, what's the size of her land, whether it's 1 dunam, 3, whatever, 3,200 square meters. You know exactly the size of the land, and you know the borders, and the issue is settled, okay? Now, the British started this in Palestine, And as you know, this is a lengthy process, as you can imagine. It needs surveyors because
ها
they go and do, like do the mapping. It needs
ها
lawyers. It
كتير
needs
اشتغلت.
judges and so on. So they started, in certain areas in Palestine, they finished prior to 1948, but obviously they only finished a very a minimal portion of Palestine. After 1948, the Israelis continued that process inside the 1948 borders. The Jordanians at some point continued that process in the West Bank and East Jerusalem that was under their rule. In certain areas, the Jordanians finished that process, but in so many areas, they even did not reach, they did not even start. In some areas, they were in the middle. Like they started the process, but the maps and the ownership was not final. It wasn't settled, and there was not final resolutions about who owns what and where. The Israelis, after the occupation in 1967, as I said, they were afraid to continue the process that the Jordanians started. So they froze everything until 2018 when they decided to resume the process in East Jerusalem. And the addition is that a couple of 3 months ago, actually they decided to expand that process to the entire West Bank, not only East Jerusalem, what they consider to be as their eternal capital, unified, and so on, where they have applied Israeli laws since 1967, but rather to finish that process also in the West Bank in Area C. And Area C, as you know, is around 55% of the West Bank. Area A and B are the areas that are heavily populated by Palestinians, the cities and the villages, but the Area C is where the entire reserve of land is, whether for Palestinians, for the Palestinian state to be established, or for the settlements. And that's why they want to finish that process so that they can grab the lands in Area C. Abed, shall I continue? I'm willing, but if you have
Yeah,
questions
no,
or
that's a very, very good introduction. Now, with this focus on Area C, with this new law, can you explain to me, is this new law that you just explained meaning that if we want to register our property in Area C, we have to make our claim that we own this property, and then that claim is going to go to this body who's going to try to settle ownership? And can you
yes?
explain what that process looks like? And I assume that the tribunal is going to be Israeli officials. And has it started? Have you seen any cases start?
So in Area C, an Israeli decision by the Israeli government was taken just recently, and they decided to budget that process. So they have allocated hundreds of millions of shekels for that process. They have issued now a bid, okay, for professionals, for companies to basically do that process on their behalf, because the public sector itself, meaning the Bureau of Land Registration, will not be able to do that. They don't have enough human
Yes.
resources to do it. So they have published the bid. The bid actually is about to finish in a few days. They are asking for proposals basically from companies who have surveyors and lawyers who would do that process on their behalf. Okay, so once this is finished and they appoint a new body, and now the new body seems to be a private, as you can understand, like a private company, but that private company works under the auspices of governmental bodies, mainly the Ministry of Justice, the Land Registration Office, and what they call the Israeli Mapping Office, and the Absentees Property Custodian, whether in East Jerusalem or in the West Bank. as I explained it earlier, whether it's neglected lands or fully absentees property land, this person is going to be heavily involved. They have also, the Israeli government, they have funded now this absentees property custodian. They have funded him with extra funding to hire more people to be able basically to defend, from their point of view, the property of the government, because that's the way they see it. Basically, it's to take more lands from Palestinians. So the process officially hasn't started, meaning even if one of you guys want now to file any claim, it's not the time. Okay, they haven't published the date, but it's going to be very soon, it seems. And the government actually decided they have like benchmarks. They said we need to finish 15% of the territory, the Area C territory in the West Bank, until this date, and then we continue and so on. So they have benchmarks, they have dates, and they will start the process very soon, which means that anybody who owns property in the West Bank needs now to be cautious, first of all, to be aware that this process is about to start. If they have relatives or lawyers locally, to be in touch with them all the time, to know where they have started the process, because they will not declare the entire area immediately. They might declare like 2 blocks, 3, 4, 5, whatever blocks at the same time in Ain Yabrud, or 10 blocks in whatever, different villages and different areas in the West Bank. And we need to be aware, meaning we as Palestinians, as owners and as professionals, once this notice is published, and usually it is published mainly in what they call the Israeli Official Gazette, which is the Israeli legal newspaper, okay, where they publish all laws and regulations and official notices. Once it's published, they give 60 days for anybody who claims rights in those lands, and within those 6 days, this claim has to be filed. If we miss the date, then your property basically is gone, and that's the crucial point. Which means, first of all, anybody in this call or from the community, we should know where we own land, where the land is located. Is it area A, B, or C? The risk now is for area C. Area A and B, to some extent, are secure to a certain extent. Okay, we'll talk about other changes if we have time that the Israeli government has introduced, but it doesn't have to do with the land registration necessarily with this process. Okay, so if it's an area C, you guys need to be aware. Okay, we have land at risk. Now we can't just like forget about it and think that the land. We can't you can't just rely that the land is back in your homeland and you can come back and get it anytime. No, if you don't do the necessary work, you might actually forfeit it, lose it, just because you didn't do your work. Maybe you have all the papers, you have all the rights, you can win it, but if you lose the deadlines, if you're not taking part in that process, then the land is transferred again to the Israeli government or to the Israeli occupation apparatus, and from them it's easily transferred to the settlement activities in the West Bank. What that means, basically, maybe those lands are in general, people, the only thing that they have as a proof is either what we call here Malia, which is a proof that they have been paying taxes over that property, because during the Ottoman period, the Ottomans they were imposing taxes on the inhabitants, and people, and also the Jordanians continue that. So people were paying taxes on lands that they owned. Okay, and sometimes that's the only proof that we as Palestinians have, because nobody would pay tax for a property that he doesn't own. Even the property that we own, actually, in terms of the Malia, usually when we have this example, and this is something that you should be aware of, sometimes we have a paper of the tax authority, okay, that says that your ancestors have been paying tax for 5 dunams, but you know that the land in reality is 20, is 4 times bigger. Okay? So don't be afraid of that. That's an obstacle, but it's a well-known obstacle. Everybody knows that the Palestinians at that time were basically underreporting. They were, they didn't want to pay tax like everybody today as well. So they were basically saying we own 5 dunams when the land was 20 or 30 or whatever. So it's a beginning of a proof. It's a beginning of a proof. If you have that tax payment slip or any proof from the tax authority, even if it doesn't reflect the exact size of the property, we can still handle that. But it's something that can be used. Others don't have even that. They might have what we call here hujja. Hujja is like a deed or an agreement, like an old, of course, agreement. You were talking about dozens of years now. It's like maybe the ancestors bought it in 1930, 40, whatever, 50. So we have that yellow paper, document that the ancestor bought it from somebody else. Also, that can be used. Obviously, the fact that you are using the land can help. If it's an Area C and the land is cultivated, or you have even a construction on it, whether it's a house or a room or a whatever, an agricultural structure, this is also another proof that can be used in the process when we file those claims. We have started filing claims in East Jerusalem because, as I told you, the process started earlier. So we are in the process in East Jerusalem. And the Israelis, as you know them, they want the land basically. So in East Jerusalem, they have started in areas where they claim that Jews have ownership or title because they bought it 100 years ago or whatever. So in certain areas, they have even finished the process. Like in some blocks in Silwan, in some blocks in Ras Al Amud, in some blocks in Beit Safafa, the process is over. Meaning without the people knowing, okay? Like they have published it in the official gazette, and by the time we started discovering that in one of the instances, maybe you have heard about it, you can Google it, in a village called Tuba in East Jerusalem, an entire neighborhood. It's not empty land, it's land full of houses, nice houses actually. It's Jerusalem, stone houses. All the Palestinians woke up one day upon receiving a letter asking them to evict their houses and their lands because their lands, their houses and the land on which the houses are built belongs to the Jewish National Fund. They came to me, and then when we started the researching it, it turned out that they have started this process of land registration in that area. The inhabitants in the houses didn't know. They saw some Israeli officials and surveyors coming to their neighborhood. They didn't know what it was about because they were living in their houses. It was not even an empty land, okay? And then after a few months, the process was over, and the Jewish National Fund was registered in the land registry, and this is almost a final registration. And based on the Israeli law, once you are registered after this process of mapping, surveying, and settlement of claims, when this process is finished, that land registration is, they call it in Hebrew, raya chotechet, which is a decisive evidence that you own the land. So all of a sudden, they woke up and they were asked to leave. And now we petitioned the Israeli Supreme Court. They sent us back to the Israeli District Court, and it took us a lot of energy just to get a temporary order preventing the Jewish National Fund from throwing those Palestinians from their houses. And the case is still ongoing. Of course, had we knew about this in advance, our situation would have been much better because we would have filed a claim. And even if the Jewish National Fund has a contradicting claim, then there are two claims, and this is a process, a very lengthy process, and so on. But we will not be under the threat of people being evacuated from their homes.
Now, we have a lot of questions in the chat. I just have a final question on clarification. So, with this process in Area C, we know it started in the East, Jerusalem. If like, let's use an example. I own land, say, in Area C. That ownership has gone to originally is owned by somebody Palestinian. Now the heirs own this property. None of the heirs live in the West Bank. They all live abroad. So I got two questions. Question one, the fact that the folks live abroad and they're not looking to relocate to the West Bank, does that make them ineligible to make this application in this petition? And number two is that if we do nothing, does that also implicate automatically that this panel is going to survey all of the areas in Area C and place everybody on notice that you have such and such date to submit your claim or it's forfeited? So those are the two questions. And I'm going to go to the chat.
The second question is easy. If we don't do anything, we're going to lose the land.
Okay.
It's as simple as that. If they declare certain areas now that they want to start this process of land registration, and basically nobody files any claim, then they'll say it's a neglected land, and then they will register the land under the name of the Israeli government. Okay, and then from there it's going to be taken to the settlements and settlement activities. Now, for the first question, it depends on different things. First of all, when the original owner died, where she or he died, did the original owner have an ID and a Palestinian identity card? Was the original owner in Palestine when he died? What happened with the land afterwards? Meaning, even if the original owner was in Palestine, what is happening with the land? Do you have somebody who's taking care of the land? Meaning, are you cultivating the land? Do you have a farmer using it? Are you renting it to somebody and so on? So if we have possession over the land, we're using it, our situation is much better. But what I'm saying is that they haven't published all the criterias. We should, even if the folks are outside of the country, and I fully understand that, that should not prevent us from finding the claim, and we can find ways to do that. Obviously, this is like a lot of people here, and I mean, I trust you guys that you are bringing only trusty people to this call, but there are ways where we can try to protect the land, whereby the owners who live in the States, like they have some kind of power of attorney for somebody in their village, or that we can find ways to show that the position and the ownership of the land is still in our hands, in a way that we would block the absentees property or the governmental agency that takes over neglected property from taking over those lands. We shouldn't just say, oh, we are away and we are not residents, or we don't have Hawiyah, or we don't have IDs. No, there are ways through which we can protect. Each case is a different and unique, but yeah, we can do a lot to protect the land.
Inshallah, offline, I'll discuss with you potentially collaborating with you and PAC, because PAC, we are pretty connected to most of the Palestinians in the West Bank. Maybe we would collaborate so that we can create a database so that we can place everybody on notice and aware that this is happening. So let's get our ducks in order, and we can collaborate on that.
Yes, once it's published in their area, their village, whatever. Yeah, that's a brilliant idea.
First question is from George Habib. If an owner has a current deed that was issued recently, is it safe from Israeli confiscation?
George, when you say a deed, that's important to know. As I said, the Jordanians continued the process of land registration or land settlement. Okay, if we are talking about a deed after the process is over by the Jordanians, okay, then they are not going to do again that process for those areas. Is that clear?
No,
The
the,
Jordanians have,
the, que-
sorry?
the question is this. So we do have current deeds in Area C around Ramallah, in the outskirts of Ramallah. They were issued 2 to 3 years ago. Are these lands safe? Because
By
we
whom? By whom they were issued? By Bet Il, by the
بيت منطقة
yeah.
C.
Do you have them with you now? Can you
Absolutely,
present?
absolutely.
Can you share?
Of course. Well, yes and no. I have to dig them.
Okay, I mean, I'll leave my contacts. Share them with me
Sure.
over email or WhatsApp, and I can tell you. I mean, it depends. If we are talking about a land deed, okay, about a property that has gone this process of land settlement, land disputes, settlement of disputes over the land by the Jordanians, and we are talking about a final registration, then you are safe, you are secure, because they are not, the Israelis will not open what has been already finished by the Jordanians. They will continue in areas where the Jordanians did not finish, or where the Jordanians did not start at all.
That's okay.
Okay?
تمام.
So in certain,
Since we're on
sorry.
the subject, I have a question that is not clear by most of us. There
Okay.
are areas that مناطق عالقة بما معناه انها الكوشان بيطلع من بيت إيل ولكن هي under the jurisdiction of البلدية particularly بلدية رام الله. So لما انت تشتري القطع هاي تضطر انك ترجع للمحكمة في رام الله وتاخذ قرار محكمة بتنفيذ الوكالة الدورية المشترى بموجبها في بيت إيل. هاي بسموها منطقة عالقة اللي هي حسب تقسيم أوسلو of course.
I guess what, yeah, go ahead.
في خطر على الاراضي هدول.
Listen,
واخر سؤال لو سمحت لان كلهم بتعلقوا في نفس الموضوع. في هناك اراضي كواشينها صادره عن سلطه اراضي فلسطينيه طبعا in this particular case it would be رام الله but under التقسيم بيجي في منطقه سي الكوشان من طابو رام الله ولكن هي في منطقه سي. Is there any imminent danger on those lands? Thank you.
yes. So I think what you are referring, I mean, they have divided us into so many categories, right? Yeah. 1948 Palestinians, East Jerusalem, West Bank, Gaza, refugees. And then again, this happens with the territory as well. And even the West Bank became A, B, and C, okay? But the most relevant is A, B, and C for this process that we are talking about, okay? Area C, because the Palestinian Authority got its jurisdiction from the Oslo agreements. The jurisdiction of the Palestinian Authority doesn't come, unfortunately, from the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination. It's not like a normal government anywhere. So it has only the authorities that were transferred to it. And authorities to the Palestinian Authority were transferred regarding land registration only in area B and area A and B. Okay, so the starting point usually is what is the category of the land? Is it area C or not? Okay, now if it's area C, then it is under that threat that we are talking about today in our conversation, and it doesn't matter where it is. Sometimes we have property that they are area C based on the agreements, but they are within Ramallah, like exactly next to the houses. I mean, it's kind of actually ridiculous. But those are the maps, okay? And I can tell you even more. Today, the one who decides or can give you an official notice what is what is the status of a certain parcel of land is only the Israeli ministry, the Israeli civil administration. There is no Palestinian governmental body that can give us. I mean, they have the maps, but they are not working with them adequately. So in each case, when we want to know any block or parcel If it's area A, B, or C, or it's a settlement, or if it's a military compound, we go back to the Israelis and ask them, and we get a certificate from them. So yes, there are areas that are considered to be C that are within the Palestinian cities. You know, even more than that, some of this area is within Jerusalem after the wall. You know, when they built the separation wall, they annexed basically area C, like in Sur Bahir. I don't know if you know these areas, but anyway, there are areas where it's not only like in one block there are there are parcels that are considered to be Jerusalem, meaning Israel, and next to them area A, and next to them area C, and they are all inside the wall. So it's crazy. But again, the most important thing, if it's area C, then it might go through that process. But I would say that the Israelis, they're not going to finish this in a couple of days. They are talking about years. But as we know them, you know, when they start, they continue. They are persistent. But the way I see it, they're not going to start with the land that is area C, but it's beyond, like inside the cities. Okay, they will leave this to the end. They want to go where they have a potential for land grab, a potential for new settlements, a potential for land purchase. And this is also something that we need to know, and I hinted about it earlier. So on top of the land registration thing that they decided to start, they are making other changes. One, which is important to know, they want to open the books of the land registry to the public. So maybe this sounds to you, what's wrong with this? Because that's the way it is in modern countries. Let's say in the US, if you want to buy a property, maybe you can go just to the land registry office and say, like, listen, parcel 12 in block number 20,000. I want to know who owns this. And you pay like $10 or whatever, $20, I don't know, and they would give you a paper saying it's owned by John Smith. Okay, and the same thing actually inside Israel in 1948 Israel, but in the West Bank, this wasn't the case until now. Nobody can get any proof of ownership for a specific parcel of land unless he or she owns it, or they prove connection to it. Okay, meaning the heirs, or you need to present papers to show that you have some connection to the land. They want to change that. They want to make it for the Israelis easier. Okay, also to try and buy lands, because they know, for example, that this land is owned by Abed. Abed doesn't live in the country; he's in New Jersey. They will contact him and say, "Listen, you're not here anyway, and your land is under risk, and so on. Why don't you sell it for us?" Okay, they want to do that. And the second thing that they are changing is the whole process of land purchase by the Israelis. And up until now, this purchase by Israelis was very complicated. Actually, an Israeli citizen, individual, was not able to purchase any parcel of land in the West Bank. The way to purchase land in the West Bank, because of an old Jordanian law that they did not repeal, okay, for anybody who was not citizen, anybody outside, not Jordanian for that matter, and of course not Palestinian, okay, Israelis included, if they want to buy a property in the West Bank, the only way to do it is to establish a company with the company registrar's office within the civil administration, to file for a permit for that deal, okay? And only if the permit is given, okay, that company that is owned by an Israeli can purchase the land. And that, of course, the Jordanians started this because they wanted to protect the lands of the Kingdom of Jordan, including the West Bank at the time. The Israelis continued with this process because they didn't want the Israeli settlers to buy property anywhere in the West Bank. They wanted only where they wanted to establish settlements. So they did not want Moshe or Yossi or Yitzchak to buy a property in Ain Arik, or to buy a property inside Ramallah and set facts on the ground. So they said, no, this process has to be controlled by us. Now they're abolishing that as well, which means basically they're making the market of land and property in the West Bank very similar to the land market inside Israel. And this is also very dangerous, and we have to be aware of. And I haven't even started talking about forgery, which is also a big issue, because they might know that Abed is in New Jersey, okay? So they might not approach Abed because they know Abed will not sell. Abed will not sell, but they will find somebody else who would forge some documents, okay? Abed doesn't come very often to the country or to the homeland, and they would forge some documents, and this agent or whatever, somebody from us, let's say, who's working with them, would sell it to them based on forged documents, and then go and prove everything from the start, which makes things also very hard. So those changes, together with the process of land registration, now poses new threats and new risks to our property, your property in the West Bank.
Yeah.
Did
We just have a couple of more minutes, so we got to move to the next questions. Ali Saleh is asking about having a house in Area B. You already answered that for the time being he's safe. Mu'taz is asking if a Palestinian has a written document, how reliable is it in the court system? You answered that question just now, because there's a lot of nuance.
Maybe Abed, I want to add to this just one sentence. And I think the previous speaker also spoke, I think Bassem spoke about it. The Palestinian Authority has started this process of land registration in Area C. Area C. They have started that with the encouragement of the Europeans, who thought that this way they actually can secure the rights of the Palestinians in Area C. But unfortunately, any document issued by the Palestinian Authority vis-a-vis land in Area C is not worth much.
Interesting. Sausan Abu Bakr, you inherited a home from her dad. As Muhammad said, there's a lot of variables here, who owned it, when they died, ownership. So we need a lot more information. This could be something offline. You could reach out to Muhammad. If a person has green ID and lives outside, is part of inheritance, and they have dispute that it is not settled, what is the threat and what should they do? One person is trying to take over all. So now they have an inheritance dispute. But again, as Muhammad said, he's going to need to know in which area. He would need to see a copy of that deed to provide you with a more. I think you should reach out to him offline. Abdul Hamid has a question, so why don't you go ahead and ask the question, Abdul Hamid. Abdul Hamid is a
Thank you.
Prominent journalist in our community, and well recognized for his expertise in Palestine. So go ahead.
Well, thank you عبد. معلش بدي أحكي بالعربي. تحياتي للأخ المحامي، وأنا بدي أخذ الأنجل، يعني الزاوية السياسية. يعني كما يقول المتنبي: يا أعدل الناس إلا في محاكمتي فيك الخصام وأنت الخصم والحكم. هو هذا العدو بيخلق هاي القضايا حتى ننشغل فيها، لأنه هو في عنده خطة لاستيلاء على الأرض. هل هناك شك عند أي أحد في هذا الكون إنها إسرائيل بدها كل إنش من الأرض الفلسطينية؟ وبيطلعوا بهاي القصة. مش بقول إن ما نحاولش، بس أنت بتروح على محكمة، هو القاضي عدوك، والمحامي اللي بيجيبوه عندهم والمحكمة والقضاء كل شيء هم أعدائك. فكيف ممكن أن نحصل حقوقنا من هذا العدو المجرم اللي هو يقوم على نقيضنا؟ هو ينكر وجود شعب فلسطيني ويعتبر أن هذه الأرض كلها إله، وهم بيخترعوا هاي القصص. في الأول أخذوا الأراضي الأميرية اللي هي تابعة للدولة، وبعدين أخذوا الأراضي في الطرق الالتفافية، وعملوا الطرق الالتفافية إلها مناطق يعني security zone، وبعدين أخذوا المستوطنات، وبعدين أخذوا المناطق اللي في القدس واعتبروا القدس كلها لهم. الآن منطقة سي هذه اللي هي من أفضل عباقرة أوسلو اللي قسموا الأرض ل A و B و C، وأعطوا الجوريسديكشن في سي لإسرائيل على أساس أن كلها 5 سنين وبنسوي الدولة الفلسطينية شاء من شاء وأبى من أبى. وهينا وصلنا بعد أكثر من 33 سنة وإحنا بنخسر أرض وبنخسر دم، وما زلنا بنحاول وبنقول هذا بدنا سلام وبدنا سلام وحل الدولتين. يعني it's enough. يعني أنت شايف الذئب وبتشوف بتدور على الأثر تبعه، مش معقول. بس أنا حبيت يعني أقول هاي
سؤال
الفكرة.
عبد الحميد،
نعم بس
سؤال.
شكرا.
عبد الحميد،
لا مش سؤال.
عبد الحميد يا سلام،
نعم.
سلم على سلامهم يا سلام زي ما قال لهم الوديع الصافي إذا بتعرف الأغاني. ولكن I can tell you that, you know, while we are saying what we are saying, okay, that doesn't mean that there aren't other ways to struggle against this. And we are doing that as well.
I agree.
So, as you know, before the ICJ, and maybe Abid mentioned that, I was part of the team, and including in those cases, you know, that the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, has decided in 2024 that the entire occupation has become illegal under international law.
Yeah,
so we are doing all what we can on all fronts, but at the end of the day, you know, I wish we had better, better actions to take.
Yeah.
But, you know, we're trying our best whether on the ground, and maybe I believe you also in the diaspora, you are doing your best, and inshallah, eventually justice will prevail, my friend.
Inshallah.
We have room for like just one or two questions. Brother Hisu says, how can we challenge the Israeli real estate companies that are coming here to do these stolen land sales in North America?
This is very important, and I think it has started. I heard something about that's happening in New York. You know, most of the land theft and the land grab is being conducted and orchestrated by through the generous donations of philanthropists and wealthy Jewish citizens of the United States. And I think there are a lot, and we have tried in the past, but I think there is a lot to be done to make that impossible for them, because actually what they are doing, they're assisting in war crimes in occupied territories. It's a long conversation, but I think actions have started, and we can, maybe this is for, we don't have enough time, but we can follow on that. I think it's very, very important, because that's the way they do it. I mean, Ilad, I don't know if you know these names, but they were getting money from Moscovich, they were getting money from Edelson, and those are American citizens who are funding these groups with huge amounts of money, something that is unimaginable. And that's the way they can take over, either through buying or purchasing or forging documents and taking over Palestinian lands in Jerusalem and in the West Bank. Yeah, we can do a lot about them, but that needs a lot of thinking and work.
Yeah, it's obvious that we're going to need to invite you back again. These are very complicated issues. The final question is from Brother Jitawi. And we have one final question from Diab Mustafa. He will ask that, but let me go with Jitawi. Could Mr. Dahleh provide a checklist of measures Area C landowners can take to strengthen and protect their ownership rights? For example, lease agreements, cultivation arrangements, powers of attorney, trusted attorneys or relatives, recommended steps. Also, are the Israeli Gazette publications you mentioned publicly accessible online? If so, could you share where they can be accessed so we can monitor them regularly? So that question, Jitawi, we already suggested that we should PAC should collaborate with him to create this checklist and to create this awareness. So absolutely, this is something that I think PAC with Professor Dahleh can do. Final question, Diab.
السلام عليكم. شكرا عبد. Thank you very much. أستاذ محمد شرفتنا. شكرا على وقتك وعلى المعلومات الثمينة. يعني بالفعل it was really an eye opening. يعني I expected this topic is important, but you really outlined in a very beautiful way and showed the very importance of this issue. I just have quick questions. First on the timeline, and inshallah, like I would say, we want to work with you definitely, and hopefully we could even host you in person. Yeah. If you're coming soon to the United States, let us know. We'll do a full out event for you. So because we were interested, maybe I don't know if that because of the time. I know Abid also has another event to go to, but that we're very important to know the timeline of the process when they're going to start in which areas, and also is there a team of attorneys right now like yourself that people can reach to and to discuss these matters? Because a lot of times people go to regular attorneys, they'll take the case, but they don't know what the hell they're doing, and they waste people's money and rent. And also what's the cost involved in this, and if because maybe some people want to do it but they don't have the money to pay for attorneys, maybe we could start looking into subsidizing these things. And my main question is also about the legal authority. Does Israel have a legal authority to do this thing, since like the Palestinian Authority doesn't have the right to do anything with RBC, but Israel is an occupying force. It's supposed to be temporary. Where do they get that power, legal power to do what they're doing? And also in the legal post right now that they putting everywhere, because it seems like this is part of the whole plan, that they're putting all these crazy shepherds and agricultural outposts, legal posts to kick
criminals
the rich to their land. Yeah.
Thank you, Diab. Beautiful questions. Now, as Abid said, I think we can cooperate and we can give you all the information once it's published. They haven't started the process officially, as I said, but they want to start it as quickly as they can. And once they choose that agency that would handle all these claims, they will publish in certain blocks. So they have started the registration land, the ownership registration process, and then we have 60 days to file the claims. Then the clock starts ticking. That's not a lot of time. 60 days is nothing. So we can prepare in advance. And going back to the question that was raised earlier about the checklist, as Abid said, we can cooperate on that. Although what the previous question mentioned, all the documents that were mentioned are actually crucial. We need all of those. All what you mentioned is very important. We can add on them. Now, regarding attorneys, yeah, I can recommend. We can, if they start the process in huge areas, we will have obviously a very trustworthy pool of Palestinian lawyers who have the expertise, who knows the Israeli military orders, and who can offer legal assistance. Obviously, this is not going to be. It costs some money, but I don't know if you know what we are doing here. But for us, this is a national struggle. So it's not about money. Once this needed, we'll find ways, even for those who cannot afford paying the necessary fees, we'll find a way to get support for them so that they can secure their rights and their property. Because securing their rights and securing the property that they own is for us something that is not personal. It's a national thing, and we want that land to remain Palestinian, and we want to prevent the Israeli settlers from taking over. So we are not doing this as a business, but rather as something that we believe in as a national struggle.
Inshallah. Muhammad, can I share your email?
Sure.
And is your email dahleh52@gmail.com?
No, I prefer maybe the other one, which is easier. 627 4070. It's easy.
627.
Yeah, 4070.
4070.
Yes, trudelgmail.com.
At
gmail.com. Yes.
So 627-4070.
Yes.
At gmail.com.
Yes, this comes to my secretary and then she can.
Perfect. I just shared it with everybody. We want to take this opportunity to thank you, Muhammad. يعطيك ألف عافية.
I'll make sure to come and visit you guys in person.
Inshallah. Thank you very much for this insightful conversation, and we appreciate it. تصبح على خير. السلام عليكم.
Thank you all for attending.
Thank you everyone for attending.
Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. I really appreciate it.